I think it got mixed up with being a psychiatrist or something like that, and they all thought they'd be analyzed to death. So I started to develop some humor around it. That's okay. It's all right. I'm not going to analyze you to death, and I'm not wheeling in my bed so you can lie down either. And maybe I just thought that was meant to be funny. But I think genuinely it was clunky and quite difficult to start, in which case I did have to develop a good sense of humor, a thick skin, and an ability to talk about the subject matter rather succinctly. And I would recommend that to anybody. I know we now call it an elevator pitch. I don't really worry about it to that degree, but I think if you can summarize what it is that you do and you can say it in a few significant sentences, I think people always value it because then they can get a handle on it very quickly. I think that would be the first point. And therefore, when it comes to business, really, they now work out I am a performance coach and I am a psychologist who supports them. I'm a professional speaker. So if they ask me for one, there's usually a double benefit in there. And it's mostly because I took up certain topics that I felt would be useful to them. So it's really the development of those topics and staying abreast of the applicability or relevance of those topics that also helps you a lot.
Right. And then ultimately, they just care that you can help them with whatever challenge they're facing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I started mine with, I'm an expert in stress, and then that morphed to, I now understand how to help people cope with change, and then that developed into resilience. And I think that's what I mean when I say it progressed over time to relevant subjects that business need help with.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. So in the world we're in, we're all dealing kind of post-pandemic to some extent. It's still existing in many ways. How do you feel like people are handling this in your clients and the people that you're working with in terms of stress and where they're at with anxiety and those types of challenges?
It's very varied. I mean, there are some businesses that were only partially affected by it, probably because of the suitability or relevance of what they're offering, and therefore they were still able to stay in business. And there were some actually that just ratcheted it up to just, amazing levels. For example, like a certain company that delivers things the next day, they're like an example of how they capitalized on the back of COVID. Then you get the understandable struggles, for example, within the travel industry and so forth. There are certain organizations and certain sectors that have just been catastrophically damaged. They are recovering and they're in the process of recovering. And I think what it comes across really as a very simple tool, which isn't meant to be demeaning. If you can batten down the hatches, meaning as the expression means take it in bite-sized chunks and you shorten them depending on how much stress you're under, what you do is get people to focus, right? This is what we need to do right now for this next month. And then that becomes the next bite-sized chunk and the next bite-sized. You then actually have these different touch points that eventually get you through to the point where you're seeing improvements or progress. Sadly, where COVID is concerned, some of that resulted in reduced workforce, because they just didn't have the money or finances to hold up the full workforce anymore. And I think the other answer to your question is many people took to working from home because they were encouraged to do so for obvious to cope with the pandemic. We're now then struggling with this disparate team and in hybrid working practices where they're some at home, some in the office. And I think that brings me to the next point. The psychological contract, which is an unwritten, unspoken set of rules and expectations about what it means to come to work, has changed. If a leader can get their head around how it has changed, then they will still come up with the equipment and the answers and the solutions to help people feel stable and secure, even if they do have to go through change processes whilst they try and do that. And the reason why the psychological contract has changed is because it's been changing for a while. It's no longer about the fact that if I come to work and I get paid, I will be happy. It's now a lot more complicated than that, especially if it revolves around hybrid working. So you still have to make sure that you stick to the three things that are going to make people feel at least comfortable. And if they feel comfortable, they'll trust you. If they trust you, they'll stay. You have to learn to work with the person you get left with and start using that person, experimenting, being out there, get the feedback, get that right, work it through a little bit, and that's how you change.
Oh my gosh, I love all of that you just said because I think so many people have money stories in particular, right? And it shows up whether you are in business for yourself, whether you own a business. And I think it also shows up as individuals, right? Like decisions they're willing to make for their own lives. Should I buy a car or not? Should I buy a house or not? Should I do anything, take a vacation? I think there's a lot of money stories. My coach described it as you either repel it or you take it in and adapt, into your life, right? And I think that was definitely something that I have been working through myself. So I'm so happy that you shared that with everybody to hear. Financially, I think that's just one piece. There's all these other pieces energetically that we have stories about too. Mm-hmm. And I love that you use Velcro, because that's what I tell people. Whatever you're thinking, you have the ability to either Velcro that to you and hold on to it, or you can let it go. You can just take it off and let it go.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things I said to somebody, and I didn't even realize it was going to be an amazing thing to have said, and I didn't mean that immodestly. It just came out of my mouth and it worked for her, because she got this huge light bulb moment, was I prefaced it with, I just want to say something to you now, because she happened to be recounting a story related to her mum and the way that her mum had handled her, and also a label that her mum had given her. And I said, okay, I really just want to say this to you now. Dump all that does not serve you. And she went, and I kind of went, has something just happened? I'm sorry. I kind of was looking around me a bit nervous in case I'd done something naughty or rude or wrong or something. And she just went, oh my goodness. I never realized. I never saw it like that. I said, well, is it a fact? And she said, no. I said, how can it be a fact? How many restaurants do you run? She said, 5. I said, you can't run 5 restaurants and not be an intelligent woman. So that label does not serve you. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they have to come to us to hear this, and this is okay too. Go for support. Go roll your life out. Let someone else listen to it, and they will help you work out what to Velcro off, because you absorb all of these messages. That does not make them right. Does not make them fact.